really appreciate Kevin. Thanks to him, we're having such a luxurious honeymoon.
What do you mean?
I used Kevin's bank deposits.
What did you just say? I called my brother and his wife, who didn't show up at my dad's funeral, and my sister-in-law nonchalantly dropped this bombshell. Not only did they skip helping with the funeral preparations, but now she swindled my dad's bank deposits. How could they?
We rented a luxury car to tour around Alaska, stayed at high-end hotels, and we've already spent $30,000. There's still money left, so we're planning to enjoy the trip until the last day of our vacation.
My sister-in-law kept rattling on, even though I didn't say a word. Wait, now that I think about it, I suddenly recalled the balance in my late dad's account and couldn't help but chuckle.
What's so funny? Are you losing it because you're not getting any of the inheritance?
No, I'm not losing it. I was just picturing their faces when they learned the truth soon enough. My name is Emma. This is the story of a family drama I went through 10 years ago. At the time, I was 30, just an average office worker. My mom had passed away in an accident when I was in my second year of high school. My dad, Kevin, was a gentle and calm man who loved my mom dearly. But without time to grieve, he had to handle her funeral as the head of the family and worked hard to reassure us.
Even though your mom's gone, you don't need to worry about a thing. I'll take care of you both until you can stand on your own.
He said this after the funeral service, looking worn out. We didn't have any relatives we could rely on, and looking back, I think this was my dad's declaration of responsibility. He worked hard balancing his job and the housework, never remarried, and raised us on his own. I respected him for that, but my younger brother, Keith, was different. Keith was always focused on himself, polite on the outside, good grades. But he was obsessed with material things and money, always looking for ways to benefit himself. My dad could never replace our mom. I worked hard at the housework, but Keith constantly complained about how clumsy I was. Yet, he never helped out, always claiming he was too busy with studies or other things. Hey, stop relying on Dad and me so much. At least clean up your own laundry and dishes.
Shut up. I'm still legally a kid. They say kids are supposed to play and study. So you and Dad are supposed to take care of me, right, Dad?
Maybe it was because he was the long-awaited son and had been spoiled growing up. Keith would laugh at me while I did chores. One day, while Dad was busy making dinner, Keith said nonchalantly, I told my friends about Mom, and they invited me out for dinner. I'm going out, so can you give me some money? Hey, can't you see what Dad's doing right now? How can you say that?
Unlike you, I'm popular. Come on, just give me $10.
Take it. Don't be out too late.
Dad handed Keith the money. Without a proper thank you, Keith left the house. Seeing this, I was furious, but Dad calmly said,
At his age, friends become more important than family. It's just a phase. He'll settle down in a few years.
However, Keith never showed signs of growing up, even as time passed. By the time he was in college, Dad was paying all his tuition, and Keith used that as an excuse to do whatever he wanted. He partied all the time and only came home to sleep. By then, I had already started working and living on my own in an apartment. I wanted to take care of myself to ease Dad's burden, even just a little. But seeing Keith, who relied on Dad for everything despite being an adult, I couldn't help but speak up.
I got into a state college thanks to my hard study. Parents are supposed to give their kids extra money to spend. If Dad didn't have any, he should have remarried some rich woman by now and lived an easier life.
Keith spat out those cruel words, mocking Dad's devotion to our late mom. I was stunned. I quietly told Dad about Keith's true nature. But whether he knew or didn't, Dad didn't seem to care. I didn't remarry because that was my choice. And Keith is right. His hard work got him into a state college. As I've always said, I'll do what I can as his parent. With Dad living with Keith, I couldn't argue. Even after Keith graduated from college and got a job, he didn't move out, didn't help with the housework, and didn't contribute any money.
What's wrong with spending the money I earn on myself? Dad's my parent, and he's supposed to take care of me until I can stand on my own.
Keith shamelessly said this as he admired the expensive watch he bought as a reward for himself. By this time, Dad was nearing retirement. I suggested sending him money to help out, but Dad refused.
You don't live with us, so there's no reason for you to pay. Besides, you worked hard for that money. You should spend it how you like. If you have extra, save it for yourself.
Dad said this and continued working diligently even after his retirement. While Keith lived a carefree life, Dad lived modestly. It was hard to watch, so I started bringing gifts on weekends that I thought would make Dad happy. This routine went on for a few years, until one day, Keith surprisingly reached out to me. He said he had someone he wanted me to meet. When I arrived at the restaurant, I found Dad in a suit, sitting with Keith and a beautiful woman.
Hey sis, I want you to meet my partner Jessica. We're getting married.
The woman introduced as Jessica politely bowed and greeted me. Thank goodness. She seemed calm and composed. I thought that maybe Keith would finally become independent after getting married, and I breathed a sigh of relief. A few months later, after his wedding, I got assigned a huge project at work, and my life became a whirlwind. I barely had time for myself, let alone to visit home. Before I knew it, 6 months had passed since I'd last seen Dad. Work has finally settled down, so maybe I should go visit home for the first time in a while. Just as I was thinking that, I got a call from Dad. Hello, Dad. It's been a while. I was thinking of coming home during my next break. Wait, what did you just say? The words from my dad drained the color from my face. He told me that when he went to the hospital due to feeling unwell, they found cancer and said he only had 6 months left. The shocking news hit me like a ton of bricks, and my mind went blank. They're going to give you chemotherapy and try some life-extending treatments, right? A deep sense of dread washed over me, and I could feel my legs start to tremble. But Dad's response was not what I expected.
No, I don't plan on doing that.
Why? If it's about the money, I'll help as much as I can. I'm your daughter.
That's not it. Sorry, but I've got things I need to take care of, and I can't just lie in bed all day, though I will quit my job. I don't want to waste money on treatments, and besides, your mom is waiting for me up in heaven.
Dad said it with a calm, almost resolute tone.
Don't worry. I'll make sure that when I'm gone, you won't have to deal with any hassle.
Hearing him say that so cheerfully made tears well up in my eyes. Okay, if that's what you want. I accepted his words for now and hung up the phone. I immediately called Keith after that. Even though Dad said what he did, I couldn't help but want him to try treatment. It's only natural as his child. But what does he mean he has things to do, even though he's quitting work? I pondered Dad's contradictory words while waiting for Keith to pick up.
Hello?
Oh, Keith, listen. I explained everything I had just heard and suggested that we both help cover some of Dad's medical expenses. Dad didn't have cancer insurance, and with only 6 months left, the medical bills would be no small amount. You've been living at home for so long, and Dad's done so much for you. Now's the time to pay him back. I'll help too, so let's support him together.
What? Why?
What? I was stunned by Keith's response. He wasn't concerned about Dad's condition at all. In fact, he was muttering something over the phone.
So, Dad's got cancer. Well, I guess that means the new house will be ready in 6 months. Will we make it in time?
What are you talking about?
Hey, Emma. Is Dad still going to be able to keep up with work and the house stuff like before? That's really what Jessica and I are worried about.
What are you saying? Did you even listen? Dad has 6 months to live. Why are you worried about something like that?
Well, we're living with him.
What?
Keith actually wanted to continue living at home, just like before, even after getting married, claiming he wanted to save for the future. And his wife, Jessica, wasn't against the idea at all. In fact, she jumped at the chance, saying, "We'll save money, so why not?" and moved in the day after they got married.
We want to buy a condo, so we're saving for a down payment. Dad's happy living with his cute son and daughter-in-law, and we get to save most of our paychecks. It's a win-win.
From the way Keith talked, it was clear he was still living the same spoiled life. Listening to him made me realize the meaning behind Dad's earlier contradictory words. It all clicked into place. Dad was being run ragged by household chores, while Keith and Jessica lived like kings, saving most of their income. It was easy to imagine that Jessica, who had witnessed Keith's carefree attitude firsthand, had also started to take advantage of Dad, living completely off him. Living together? More like parasites. If that's the case, then it wouldn't hurt to give Dad a little bit from those savings.
Why? I told you, our savings are for our future home. Besides, the cancer has spread all over, hasn't it? There's nothing anyone can do. Even if he fights it, nothing's going to change much, and it'll just be a burden on Dad. It's a waste of money, a total waste.
Keith's heartless words left me speechless. This is a family crisis. Don't you want our parent to live as long as possible, even if just for one more day or one more second?
That's your opinion, Emma. Don't push it on me. Either way, we're not wasting a penny on that.
Keith said it bluntly before hanging up the phone. I was so frustrated and angry that I threw my cell phone onto the couch. There's no way I can leave Dad in their care. I immediately started the process to terminate my apartment lease and decided to move back home. It would take some time, but I could still commute to work, and more importantly, I'd be there if anything happened to Dad. Above all, I wanted to spend as much of Dad's remaining time with him as possible. When I finally moved back a month later, the first thing I noticed was the chaotic state of the house, clearly reflecting Keith and Jessica's lifestyle. Half-empty beer cans, makeup products scattered everywhere, clothes tossed around the living room. Dad, moving slowly, was cleaning up after them one item at a time. As expected, this so-called living together arrangement was really just Dad taking care of two oversized children. Don't worry about the house. I'll take care of everything.
Thank you, Emma.
I helped Dad to bed, seeing how tired he was, and then sighed as I looked around the messy living room. According to Dad, Keith and Jessica had panicked when they heard about his retirement, but after finding out he received a substantial retirement bonus, they quickly went back to living as they always had. What's more, they continued to rely on Dad for everything: housework, living expenses, under the guise of letting him live the way he's used to. I was beyond angry at that point, just completely dumbfounded. Dad said it was his parental instinct to want to do everything he could for his son and daughter-in-law so they could be happy in the future. But that kind of kindness was only enabling them. Later that night, after Dad had fallen asleep, I returned to the living room and finally saw Keith and Jessica for the first time since I'd come back. Were they always like this? Maybe it was just that I hadn't seen them in a while. but they looked much flashier than when they first got married. Keith glared at me, clearly irritated.
Hey Emma, where's our dinner?
Emma, you're here to take over the housework for Kevin, right? Well, can you do your job properly, please?
And the laundry's piling up too. Are you really this lazy, sis? No wonder you're still single.
I rubbed my temples as the two of them whined at me like children. I figured this might happen, but really? That's the first thing you say after not seeing your sister for so long? I don't mind the complaints, but can't they at least show some concern about Dad's condition? Look, I came back for Dad, not to take care of you two.
What? You expect us to do housework? We both work late every day.
Yes, I do. Dad and I both work, and like most adults in the world, we handle our own chores. You're planning to buy a house, right? So you should start learning to take care of yourself now. I said it coldly. Keith and Jessica kept nagging me, saying things like, "You should do the chores since you're replacing Dad." But eventually, when they realized I wasn't budging, they gave up. They stopped saying anything and even avoided looking at me. They showed no concern for Dad's health, spending their time either holed up in their room or out of the house. Since they had savings, I assumed they were using laundromats or staying at hotels. Occasionally, I'd notice that the cereal or juice I had stocked was gone, or I'd find their clothes mixed in with the laundry I'd hung out to dry. It was frustrating, but between work, house chores, and taking care of Dad, I didn't have the energy to pick fights over every little thing. As long as they didn't try to force me or Dad to do their chores, I decided to turn a blind eye. But what really mattered to me was Dad. He was getting more frail by the day, spending longer and longer in bed. I focused all my energy on caring for him, helping with his affairs, and making sure I fulfilled his wishes as much as possible. Despite my efforts, Dad refused any life-extending treatments or medications. And a little over 6 months later, he lost consciousness and was rushed to the hospital, where he passed away. Even as Dad was taken to the hospital, Keith and Jessica didn't show up. I was the one who informed them of Dad's death over the phone. I'll start making his funeral arrangements right away. You two need to be ready.
Okay.
Keith sounded flustered. Did hearing about Dad's death finally make him realize what's happening? After sending Dad to the church, I returned home to find the house empty. But I felt no sadness and no anger. I had stopped expecting anything from Keith and Jessica long ago. I immediately began preparing for the funeral, and as his daughter, I took on the role of chief mourner. Thanks to the preparations Dad had made ahead of time, everything went smoothly. The funeral went off without a hitch, and I was comforted by the kind words and tears of the mourners who came to pay their respects to my dad. Keith and Jessica didn't show up once during Dad's funeral. I was so shocked by their complete lack of decency that I tried to contact them, but my calls kept going to voicemail. I finally got in touch with them the day before the 7th day after I returned home with a small urn.
Hello, Emma.
Jessica answered Keith's phone. It was unusually noisy on her end.
Keith's at the front desk right now handling some paperwork, so he can't come to the phone. Sorry about that.
Wait, the front desk? Paperwork? Where are you guys? You didn't even show up to the funeral.
We're at a hotel. We're in Alaska right now.
What?
Yeah, well, we got a long leave for bereavement, so we thought, why not take a late honeymoon?
Using bereavement leave to take a honeymoon instead of attending Dad's funeral? What are they thinking? I was so shocked I couldn't even speak. But then Jessica dropped another bombshell, completely nonchalant.
We really owe Kevin Thanks to him, we're having such a luxurious honeymoon.
What do you mean by that?
Wait, Emma, you didn't know? We borrowed his bank card from the safe box and used Kevin's savings.
What? We had only one safe in the house. We kept all the family's valuables in a small drawer, the only one in the house that could be locked. The only people with keys were Dad, Keith, and me. Since I had Dad's key, Jessica must have borrowed Keith's to open it. Instead of feeling guilty, she proudly continued her story.
While you were busy running around, we took care of it. Once a death certificate is filed, you can't withdraw the money, right? So when we got the call from the hospital, I rushed to the bank. It was pretty tight timing. While I was at the bank, Keith handled the travel and rental car arrangements. This was all Keith's plan. Smart, huh?
From the outside, it looked like looting in a time of crisis, but she spoke without a shred of shame. I was speechless.
Thanks to that, we've already toured Alaska in a luxury rental car and stayed in high-end hotels. We've spent $30,000 so far, and there's still money left, so we plan to enjoy our trip until the last day of our leave. That's fine, right?
Jessica kept chatting away, not noticing that I hadn't said a word. Wait, something doesn't add up. I remembered the balance in Dad's account and realized something wasn't right. A possibility crossed my mind, and I couldn't help but chuckle. Startled by my sudden laughter, she asked,
What's so funny? We have a right to the inheritance. Are you going crazy because you're not getting a share?
Still laughing, I replied, Hey, just out of curiosity, did you double-check the name on that bank account?
The name? Of course we checked.
Okay, well, do whatever you want. Honestly, I wasn't expecting to inherit anything anyway. As soon as I said that, she hung up, clearly irritated. Just as well. It was time to teach those two irresponsible and spoiled people a little lesson. A few days later, Keith and Jessica returned, looking pleased with themselves. As I was tidying up the house, I casually addressed them. You said you're buying a condo, right? So you won't be staying in this house? If needed, I can change the name on the deed.
We don't need this old house. We're moving soon anyway, so do whatever you want.
Got it. I'll take care of this place then. There's probably nothing valuable left here after Dad's affairs were sorted. But if there are any keepsakes or things you want, feel free to take them.
We don't need any of it. We don't want to bring old stuff into our new home.
Jessica snapped, her nose in the air, and then she and Keith went out to continue their house hunting. They didn't help with any of the cleanup or paperwork, but honestly, that worked in my favor. Once they decided on buying a condo, I proceeded with the paperwork to sell our family home. And I moved into an apartment near my workplace. Not long after, Keith called me. He's sounding unusually frantic.
Emma, did you take my money? Almost all of my savings are gone.
Just as I thought. I calmly asked, I didn't take anything. Why did you check the exact date and time of the withdrawals?
It was just before our honeymoon.
He mumbled the date and time. At that time, I was still at the hospital. That's when the doctor had just told me Dad passed away. If you don't believe me, you can call the hospital. After that, I was busy with the paperwork and making funeral arrangements. I barely had a moment to breathe. I could hear Jessica gasp on the other end, probably because they had the phone on speaker.
What's wrong? Did you mistake my account for Dad's?
Of course, Dad's account was nearly empty after we sorted out his affairs.
What?
I heard two stunned voices at once. Neither of them had helped with Dad's care or the preparations for his estate, so they had no idea. When Mom passed away, I forgot to withdraw the money from her account, and it got frozen. And since she didn't have proper insurance, it was a real struggle to come up with the funeral expenses. There wasn't much savings left anyway, thanks to a certain someone, and Dad wanted me to withdraw what little was left for his funeral. Even if they took Dad's bank book, there was nothing left to withdraw. Besides, Dad's name was Kevin Smith, and my brother's name was Keith Smith. If they were in a hurry and it was dark, it wouldn't have been impossible for them to confuse the two. Jessica snapped at me.
Emma, that's so unfair. Why didn't you tell us at the time?
Why would I need to tell you? You just used your own savings for your trip. I had no reason to say anything. After all, they had skipped their own father's funeral for a vacation. There was no reason for me to be kind to them.
What are we supposed to do now? We won't have enough for the down payment on the condo tomorrow.
Don't look at me. This is your fault for coming up with such a plan in the first place.
Listening to them argue, I calmly said, "If you can't move into your condo, maybe you should start by looking for an apartment."
What? Why should we rent an apartment when we have a house we can live in for free?
What are you talking about? Keith's statement made me furrow my brows.
Yeah, we'll just stay here until we've saved up for the condo.
Think of it as helping maintain the family home. If you deposit $200 a month, that should be enough. You'd be happy to keep this place with all its memories for just $200 a month. Right, Emma?
There was no saving these two. They were excited as if this plan was already set in stone, even though I hadn't agreed to anything. I had no choice. It was time to bring these two dreamers back to reality. That's not happening.
Why not? You live on your own. So why not help out your cute little brother a bit?
That's not the point. I've already completed the process to sell the house.
What?
Caught up in their honeymoon and condo plans, Keith and Jessica had been so wrapped up in themselves that they hadn't noticed anything. I could picture their confused faces, with question marks practically floating above their heads. You weren't paying attention. I asked both of you, and you said I could do whatever I wanted with the house. You also said you didn't need it. Now, take responsibility for your own words and move out. Goodbye.
Wait.
Before Keith could say anything else, I hung up. I wasn't going to waste any more time dealing with this airheaded couple. I immediately blocked Keith's number, and of course, Jessica's too. At the end of the month, I went to check on the house just in case, and to my relief, they were gone. It seemed they had really moved out, and I breathed a sigh of relief. The sale of the house was finalized soon after, and eventually, I received the money from the sale. Well, I suppose I'll have to give Keith his share. I decided to unblock Keith's number. The moment I did, as if he had been waiting for it, my phone rang with a call from him. Had he been trying to contact me every day, even though I had blocked him? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Honestly, I didn't want anything to do with him anymore, but I knew I had to sort out the financial details, or it could cause problems later. I took a deep breath and answered the phone. Keith's frantic voice immediately came through.
Finally. Why didn't you pick up before? I need your help.
Keith continued, sounding more desperate.
We thought the house was old and too big, so we rented a brand new apartment. But now, the rent and utility bills are way higher, and she doesn't do any of the housework.
In short, after rushing to rent an apartment, they realized that having relied on Dad for everything, they had no idea how to pay bills or take care of themselves. Keith was now complaining endlessly. It seemed they had finally come to grips with how dependent they had been. So, you finally realize just how much you've been taking advantage of everything. For years, Keith had sponged off Dad, not just relying on him financially, but for every aspect of life, never lifting a finger to help. Thrown into the real world, they clearly couldn't manage. But honestly, it wasn't entirely their fault. Dad had enabled this behavior. Considering the inheritance, if they really learned their lesson, I could teach them how to manage a household and budget from scratch. Just as I was about to offer some help, Keith suddenly switched to his usual whiny tone.
Come on, Emma. Don't you think it's kind of your fault that we ended up like this?
I quickly took back my earlier thought. With a long sigh, I realized they were still trying to pass the blame.
I mean, as the big sister, wouldn't it be nice if you came over and helped us out with some housework or something? After all, siblings should stick together and support each other. That's the best way to honor Dad, right? Here, let me give you the address so you can.
Keith rambled on, oblivious to how selfish he sounded. What are you talking about? I've been telling you for years to help out, but you never listen.
Well, I was a kid back then.
And you didn't change when you became an adult. Do you really think that's a valid excuse? And after Mom passed, you just used it as an excuse to goof off while still relying entirely on Dad. Not to mention when Dad was suffering the most. You didn't even show up for his care or the funeral. Someone like that shouldn't talk about family loyalty. Keith fell silent, and I delivered my final statement. The only reason I picked up the phone was to let you know I'm going to give you your share of the money from the house sale.
Wait, really?
The excitement in his voice irritated me. But don't get too happy. The cost of demolishing the house was high, so there's not much left. But don't worry, I'll send your share via registered mail. Consider it severance pay.
What?
Don't you get it? I don't ever want to deal with you two again. You've treated us like servants and an ATM. Have you ever done anything for this family? You took advantage of Dad's kindness and ignored all my warnings. This is the result.
But if you don't help us, Jessica and I can't survive. You're really going to abandon your own brother? We're family.
If I hadn't moved back, what do you think would have happened to Dad? And anyone who skips their father's funeral for a vacation, using his money no less, is not someone I want to call family.
That was all Jessica's fault. I do feel bad about Dad. So,
You were pathetic. Now you're trying to blame your wife to save yourself. Even after finding out he had cancer, Dad still thought of us first. He liquidated everything he owned and saved it for his own funeral expenses. Because of that, there wasn't much left of the inheritance, but we didn't have to pay a single cent. Dad fulfilled his responsibility as a father to the very end. Keith was speechless, and I continued. And no matter how much you regret it, the person you should apologize to is no longer here. You need to accept that. With that, I quietly hung up the phone. They were the ones who abandoned our family first. I had no intention of being kind or helping them. I quickly sent Keith his share of the money via registered mail and then changed my phone number and moved. Sometime later, I happened to learn about Keith through social media. From what I could see, he and Jessica were struggling, relying on takeout and laundromats to get by, and their savings were rapidly dwindling. Now they were living in poverty. Unable to live as they once had, their marriage grew strained, but neither could survive alone. So they stayed together, blaming each other for everything. Their lifestyle became increasingly reckless, with mounting debt and a growing sense of bitterness, as their social media posts were filled with complaints and a longing for luxury. Meanwhile, I met my now husband after moving, and we got married. We've been blessed with 2 children, and even after 10 years, we're still happy. We both work, but we share the household chores, which lightens the load for everyone. They tried to use the money without permission because he was a family member, and they ended up encountering such a chaotic situation. Though I wasn't directly harmed, it was all thanks to Dad, who made sure we wouldn't be burdened. I am thankful to my family for supporting me, and today my family and I are praying for my parents.